Look at this. When you pull it apart, you get steam, perfectly separated flaky layers, and molten cheddar cheese stretching right down the middle. That is a bakery-style croissant. To build that structure from scratch at home, you have to master a process called lamination, and making laminated dough requires absolute precision. You are fighting the clock, and you are fighting room temperature. Your raw materials dictate your success. You need high-quality block cheddar, and more importantly, you need European-style butter with a minimum of 82% butterfat. Standard grocery butter contains too much water, which causes the dough to fail in the oven. You also need specific tools to protect those ingredients. A chilled marble rolling pin is recommended because it pulls heat away from the dough, keeping everything structurally intact while you work. Controlling these specific ingredients and applying the right physical tools is what takes a basic bread mixture and turns it into an engineered, multi-layered pastry architecture. We start by building the foundation, the dough. Mix your yeast with a little warm water and flour to create a sponge. Once you see active bubbling on the surface, you know the yeast is alive. Add in the remaining flour, cold milk, and salt. Knead this mixture. It will start out as a very shaggy, messy mass. Keep working it for about 10 minutes until it transforms into a tight, perfectly smooth ball of dough. Next, we make the bourrage, which is the French term for the butter block. Take your cold, high-fat butter, place it between parchment paper, and physically pound it with a rolling pin into an 8 by 8 inch square. Here is the baseline rule for this entire process. Heat is the enemy. Both the kneaded dough and the flattened butter block must immediately go into the refrigerator. They need to reach a frosty, chilled state before we move on. The dough and the butter need to have the exact same internal temperature and physical pliability. If one is softer than the other, the layers will crush together. Matching those states is the non-negotiable requirement for successful lamination. Look at this schematic. To begin lamination, roll your chilled dough out into a 9 by 18 inch rectangle. Place your 8 by 8 butter block directly in the center, fold the flaps over to fully encase it, and inch the edges tight so the fat cannot escape. Now, gently roll that package out into a long rectangle again. We are going to perform a letter fold. Fold the bottom third up, but before folding the top third down, sprinkle your first layer of grated cheddar cheese directly onto the dough. Then close the fold. You need to execute this exact sequence, rolling, adding cheese, and folding 3 more times. With each fold, you are multiplying the structure, creating alternating microscopic bands of dough, butter, and cheddar. You must chill the dough in the refrigerator for 20 minutes between every single fold. If you skip the chilling phase, you hit a catastrophic failure point. The dough warms up, the gluten resists the rolling pin, and the butter melts directly into the flour structure instead of remaining in distinct sheets. Managing those thermal limits while executing the folds is how you build the internal honeycomb structure. If you respect the temperature, you get a flaky pastry. If you ignore it, you end up with a dense, flat cheese roll. Once your final fold is chilled, roll the dough out into one large, thin slab. To get the correct shape, you need precise cuts. Map out isosceles triangles that measure exactly 3 to 4 inches wide at the base. To shape the croissant, cut a small half-inch slit dead center at the base. Gently stretch the dough down its length and roll it tightly from the wide base all the way up toward the apex. Notice how the pastry is positioned here. You have to physically lock the very tip of the triangle underneath the bottom center of the mass. Do not ignore this step. As the butter melts and the dough produces gas in the oven, it generates physical pressure. If the tip is not pinned down by the weight of the croissant, the entire pastry will violently unravel while it bakes. Relying on those precise geometric cuts and maintaining structural tension is what forces the dough to expand upward, creating that iconic, multi-layered crescent form. Set the shaped croissants on a baking sheet to proof. They need to sit at room temperature for 1 to 2 hours. You are looking for them to double in size and develop a soft, jiggly structure when you shake the pan. Brush the tops with a light egg wash. The specific combination of proteins and sugars in the egg reacts under high heat to give the crust a glistening, dark brown finish. We use a dual temperature baking strategy. Put the tray into a hot 400-degree oven for 10 minutes. That aggressive heat creates maximum initial lift as the water in the butter turns to steam. Then drop the temperature to cook the interior without scorching the outside. Watch what happens inside the oven. You should see the layers visibly separate and puff upward. A little butter pooling is perfectly fine, but if you see massive leakage spreading across the pan, that tells you the butter melted during the lamination prep. When you pull them out, look for a deep golden brown crust and distinct texturing along the edges. When you give them a gentle squeeze, you should hear a loud, shattering crunch from the exterior shell. By mastering thermal control during lamination, executing precise geometric cuts, and honoring the biological proofing phase, you have successfully engineered a bakery-quality cheddar croissant right in your own kitchen.